It was a chilly autumn morning when I found myself standing in front of a small, dilapidated building on the corner of a quiet street. I had always dreamed of starting my own business, but it was one thing to daydream about it, and quite another to take the first steps. This building was where my journey would begin, and it didn't look like much, but it was all I could afford. The past year had been a whirlwind. I had quit my stable job in marketing, a decision I still questioned daily, but deep down, I knew I couldn't spend another year working for someone else. I wanted something of my own, something that would challenge me, inspire me, and give me the freedom to design my future. Starting a business was never going to be easy. The savings I had were slim, and my experience was mostly in advertising, not running a company from the ground up. But I had an idea. It was simple enough. I wanted to open a small boutique coffee shop that focused on local, organic ingredients and had a cozy, inviting atmosphere. I envisioned it as a place where people could come not only for a cup of coffee, but also for a sense of belonging. I wanted to create a space where people could escape from their busy lives and feel at home. The coffee shop idea was born out of frustration with the corporate coffee giants that seemed to dominate every street corner. They served mediocre coffee in an impersonal environment. Every cup tasted the same. Every location looked identical. There was nothing special about it. I thought, if I could create a space with character, with real flavors, and make people feel valued, it would be something worth trying. I had little money to work with, so I had to be resourceful. I spent countless nights scouring local thrift stores for furniture. I found an old wooden table that looked like it had been around for decades. It had a charm that nothing from an IKEA catalog could replicate. The chairs were mismatched, but I liked the eclectic feel. I painted the walls a deep green, hoping it would make the space feel inviting and grounded. I even managed to find an old espresso machine on Craigslist, which I had restored for a fraction of the price of a new one. Every penny had to stretch, and every decision was carefully weighed. The first few months were rough. The location wasn't ideal. The street was quieter than I had hoped, and many of my initial customers were just curious passersby. Word of mouth was slow, and the steady flow of customers I had hoped for seemed to be just out of reach. But I wasn't going to give up. I couldn't afford to. I put in 18-hour days, managing every aspect of the business myself. I was the barista, the janitor, the marketer, and the accountant. It was exhausting, but I couldn't afford to hire anyone else, not yet. I quickly learned that the key to success wasn't just about having great coffee. It was about building relationships. I started to remember my customers' names and their favorite orders. I would offer them discounts for their loyalty and make small talk with them every time they came in. Slowly but surely, a regular group of customers started to form. Some were freelancers who came in to work on their laptops, while others were stay-at-home parents looking for a quiet place to read. One older gentleman came in every morning at exactly 7:30 a.m. and would order the same black coffee. He never said much, but he always smiled and nodded as he left. I learned that each of them came for more than just the coffee. They came for the atmosphere, for the sense of community I had started to cultivate. But even as I built these relationships, the business still struggled financially. I had a loyal customer base, but the rent, bills, and supply costs kept piling up. I was just one step away from having to close the doors for good. I thought about going back to a corporate job, but I had come too far to give up now. There had to be a way to make this work. Then, a breakthrough came in the form of an event. I decided to host a local artist night, where people could come and showcase their art, music, and poetry. I thought it would be a small gathering, just a handful of people interested in supporting local talent. What I didn't expect was the outpouring of interest. The event sold out, with people spilling out into the street. It was an unexpected success, and it gave me the boost I desperately needed. The event didn't just fill the shop with people. It brought attention to the business. New customers started to visit after hearing about the event, and it created a sense of buzz around the place. That night, I realized the importance of embracing creativity and community, not just coffee. The success of that event allowed me to reinvest into the business. I used the funds to improve the space and expand my menu. I began offering baked goods from a local bakery, which attracted even more customers. I also started to explore different types of coffee beans, experimenting with blends that reflected the local culture. I took a trip to the coffee farms in a nearby region, where I learned about the importance of sustainable sourcing and how to build relationships with farmers. It wasn't just about selling coffee anymore. It was about telling a story through every cup. As the business grew, so did my confidence. I hired a small team of baristas, each of whom shared the same vision I had for the shop. We worked together to create a place that felt like home for everyone who walked through the door. I learned to delegate, to trust my team, and to focus on the bigger picture. Slowly, the shop became a staple in the community. A few years later, I expanded and opened a second location in a more bustling part of town. It was nerve-wracking at first, but the success of the original shop gave me the courage to take that leap. By that point, I had built enough of a brand that people were willing to follow me. The second location was a hit, and it wasn't long before I started to consider even further expansion. Looking back, I realized that the key to success wasn't just about finding the right location or having the perfect business plan. It was about persistence, relationships, and staying true to what made the business special. It was about building a community, one cup of coffee at a time. The road wasn't easy, and there were times when I doubted myself, but every challenge was an opportunity to grow. Today, I'm proud of what I've built, and every time I walk into one of my shops, I'm reminded of that small, rundown building where it all started. It's a constant reminder that with hard work, determination, and a little bit of luck, you can turn a dream into a reality. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I'm an entrepreneur who started my business from scratch, worked through failure, and eventually found success. This is a story about how I turned a single idea into a thriving business, but also the lessons I learned along the way about perseverance, sacrifice, and the realities of running a startup. In 2015, I was 26, living in a small one-bedroom apartment, working as a software engineer. Like many people in my position, I had dreams of starting my own company, but didn't know where to begin. The whole idea of entrepreneurship felt like this distant mountain, and I was just a guy standing at the bottom, looking up. I had an idea for a mobile app that would allow people to instantly book parking spaces in crowded city centers. It was simple, and I'd seen similar concepts in the market, but none of them were effective. They were clunky, outdated, and really only served larger commercial spaces, not individual private owners who might want to rent out their driveways or empty lots for a few hours. I thought, why not create something more user-friendly for the everyday person? I didn't have a lot of money to get started, so I used every bit of my savings, about $6,000, to hire a freelance developer to help me build the app. I designed the prototype myself, wrote the business plan, and spent sleepless nights researching competitors. I remember how excited I was the first time the app started working on my phone. It was only a basic version, but seeing the idea come to life in real time was incredible. The next step was marketing. I had no clue how to get people to actually use the app. So, I turned to social media, focusing on Facebook and Instagram. I created content about the struggles of finding parking, shared user testimonials, and posted about how my app could change that. I even did a few sponsored posts, hoping to catch the attention of people in major cities. A couple of months in, I had a small, but growing user base. People were downloading the app, and a few even used it to book parking spaces. I was excited, but still terrified. I knew that most apps don't make it past the first year, and I didn't want to be just another failed entrepreneur with a good idea that didn't pan out. But despite my early optimism, things quickly took a turn. A competitor with a similar app, backed by millions in venture capital, launched a marketing campaign that completely overshadowed mine. They had a polished, high-budget campaign with TV ads, sponsorships, and influencers promoting their app. I felt completely defeated. I didn't have the funds to compete, and I couldn't keep up with the flashy campaigns that were bombarding the market. By the end of the first year, my app had barely gained any traction, and I was running out of money fast. I considered quitting several times. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, looking at my bank balance, which had almost dipped to zero. I had no other income and could barely afford rent. I thought to myself, this isn't going to work. Maybe this whole idea was just a fantasy. But there was something in me that refused to quit. I didn't want to give up on the dream of building something real. I decided to pivot. Instead of focusing on big cities where competition was too fierce, I shifted my focus to smaller, less saturated towns and suburbs. I began reaching out to local businesses and homeowners directly, offering them an opportunity to list their spaces on my platform. I also started integrating payment systems and better customer service to make the app more reliable. I didn't have a huge budget for advertising, so I got creative. I reached out to local bloggers and influencers to help spread the word. I offered free parking listings to anyone who would help, which brought in a steady stream of new users. Slowly, the app started to grow, though it was still far from profitable. During this time, I realized that scaling a startup isn't just about having a good product. It's about knowing your audience and being willing to hustle. I had no choice but to work 18-hour days, balancing the app development with marketing and customer support. I was living off ramen noodles and coffee, barely sleeping, and always on the lookout for the next big opportunity. It took about 2 years before the app was starting to generate some revenue, but even then, I was still scraping by. The breakthrough came when a small chain of gas stations reached out, interested in partnering with me to offer parking spaces at their locations. I jumped at the chance. This deal provided me with a reliable revenue stream and gave my app some much-needed credibility. By 2019, my app had grown into a profitable business, and I was able to hire a small team. We expanded to major cities, and eventually, venture capitalists started showing interest. The app was gaining traction in the market, and I had finally managed to secure a round of funding. Now, looking back, I realize how many times I could have given up. I could have let the initial failure, the competition, and the financial struggles break me. But I kept going because I believed in my idea. I learned that persistence and adaptability are everything. Success doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't come easily, but it's possible if you're willing to put in the work. In 2023, my app was acquired by a major tech company. It was a bittersweet moment for me. Selling the business was not something I had planned, but it felt like the right next step. I had built something meaningful, and now it was time for the app to reach an even larger audience under new ownership. What did I learn from all this? First, that entrepreneurship is a journey, and the road is filled with ups and downs. You have to be ready to fail and learn from those failures. Second, that passion and perseverance are the real keys to success. If I had given up after my first, second, or third setback, I would have never gotten to where I am today. If you're out there, sitting on an idea and wondering if it's worth pursuing, my advice is simple. Do it. Start small, learn as you go, and don't be afraid to fail. It's all part of the process. The only real failure is giving up before you've even tried. I never thought I'd be where I am today. It's a funny thing how life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. Back in 2018, I was just another guy working a 9-to-5 job, trying to make ends meet. I had dreams, big ones, but no clear path forward. I'd always been fascinated by business, but honestly, I didn't know the first thing about entrepreneurship. I grew up in a small town where most people just went through the motions. You graduate high school, maybe get a college degree, find a steady job, and that's it. But I wasn't satisfied with that. The idea of having my own business kept creeping into my mind, especially after hearing stories of people who had built something from the ground up. The problem was, I had no idea where to start. I had a decent job as a project manager for a tech company, but it was nothing that set my soul on fire. Sure, I had a stable income, benefits, and weekends off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant for something more. I had a lot of what-ifs running through my head. What if I could create something of my own? What if I could take the leap and start a business? But like most people, I was scared. Scared of failing, scared of losing money, and scared of disappointing those around me. The turning point came when I was at a crossroads in my life. I had been passed over for a promotion at work, despite putting in the effort and working late nights for months. I was frustrated and felt like I wasn't moving forward. The moment I realized I had nothing left to lose was the moment I decided to start looking for my own opportunities. I started small, really small. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, looking up business ideas that didn't require a lot of startup capital. I had saved up a bit of money, but I wasn't about to blow it all on something that could end in failure. After weeks of researching, reading blogs, and watching YouTube videos, I settled on the idea of creating an online store. It seemed manageable enough, and I could run it from home while still working my full-time job. I spent a few months researching products, suppliers, and how to set up an online store. I decided to focus on a niche that I was passionate about: fitness and wellness. I'd always been into health and fitness, and I figured that if I was going to sell something, it might as well be something I actually believed in. The first step was creating a website. I remember feeling so overwhelmed by all the options: Shopify, WordPress, Wix. There were so many platforms to choose from, and they all had their pros and cons. After some trial and error, I finally settled on Shopify. It seemed user-friendly, and I could get started without much hassle. The next hurdle was figuring out what products to sell. At first, I thought I'd go the route of selling fitness equipment, but the costs of storing and shipping the products were just too high. That's when I discovered dropshipping. For those who don't know, dropshipping is when you sell products without ever holding inventory. The supplier ships the products directly to your customer when an order is made. It seemed perfect for me because it meant I wouldn't have to invest in large quantities of inventory upfront. I spent the next few months building my store, sourcing products, and creating marketing materials. I'll admit, it wasn't easy. There were plenty of late nights and moments when I thought I was wasting my time. But I pushed through. I reached out to influencers in the fitness space, hoping they'd promote my products. I learned about Facebook ads, Instagram marketing, and the power of SEO. Slowly but surely, sales started trickling in. The first sale I made felt like a victory, even though it was only for a small item. It was validation that my idea wasn't completely crazy. But after the initial excitement wore off, I realized how much work was still ahead of me. Running an online store wasn't just about setting it up and hoping people would buy. I had to keep tweaking my ads, optimizing my website, and engaging with customers. Fast forward a year, and my little side hustle had started to take off. I was making enough money to quit my job, but I didn't make the leap immediately. I had learned the hard way that you can't just dive into entrepreneurship without a solid foundation. Instead, I kept working my 9 to 5 while my business grew. I didn't want to risk it all on a whim, and looking back, I'm glad I didn't. The moment I decided to quit my job was one of the scariest things I've ever done. But I had built up enough of a financial cushion to give it a shot. My business had grown to the point where it could sustain me, and I figured it was time to fully commit. I handed in my resignation and started working on my business full-time. What followed was a period of rapid growth. I expanded my product line, started offering customized fitness plans, and partnered with local gyms to cross-promote. The biggest breakthrough came when I launched a fitness course that taught people how to get in shape from home. It resonated with so many people, and sales skyrocketed. But with success came new challenges. Managing inventory, handling customer service, and keeping up with demand were just a few of the problems I faced. There were times when I felt overwhelmed, but I knew I couldn't go back to working for someone else. I had built this business from the ground up, and I wasn't about to let it fail. Today, my business is thriving. I've expanded into new product categories, hired a small team, and even created a subscription box for fitness enthusiasts. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm proud of what I've accomplished. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. From that guy sitting at his kitchen table, unsure of where to start, to a full-fledged entrepreneur, it's been a wild ride. If I could give advice to anyone thinking about starting a business, it would be this: start small, be patient, and don't be afraid to fail. Failure isn't the end, it's a lesson. I've had my fair share of mistakes, but they've all taught me something valuable. And above all, don't let fear hold you back. There's a world of opportunity out there, and you have the power to make your dreams a reality. If I can do it, so can you. You just have to take that first step, no matter how small it is. Don't wait for the perfect moment, because it may never come. Start today, and see where it takes you. I never thought my journey as an entrepreneur would be so chaotic, but looking back, it feels like everything happened for a reason. I was working a stable job in a corporate environment, going through the daily grind of meetings, deadlines, and the occasional office gossip. To be honest, I was comfortable, maybe even a little too comfortable. But deep down, something was missing. I had always dreamed of running my own business, but the fear of failure kept me stuck in the safety of my 9 to 5. It all started with a simple idea. One weekend, I was at a coffee shop, and I overheard a conversation between two people. They were talking about a problem they were facing with managing their day-to-day tasks. It wasn't anything groundbreaking, just the usual struggle with staying organized in a fast-paced world. But it struck a chord with me. I had always been a bit of a tech geek, always looking for tools and apps to make life easier. It dawned on me that there could be a better way to help people manage their personal and professional lives more efficiently. A tool that combined all the best features of existing apps into one platform. I went home that night, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started researching the app development space, diving into articles, forums, and YouTube tutorials. I realized this was something I could create myself. The idea was simple: an app that integrated task management, calendar syncing, and communication in one place, making it easier for people to stay organized without jumping between multiple platforms. The next morning, I decided I was going to take the leap. I quit my job. I didn't have much saved up, but I was determined to make this work. I didn't have any formal education in coding, but I believed I could learn. I spent weeks on end watching tutorials, practicing coding, and sketching out the app's features. I made countless mistakes, ran into dead ends, and felt frustrated more times than I can count. But each failure taught me something new, and I slowly started seeing progress. The first version of the app was, to put it bluntly, awful. It crashed constantly. The user interface looked like something from the 90s, and half the features didn't work. But it was a start. I showed it to a few friends and asked for feedback. Some were kind, some were brutally honest, but all of them pointed out the same thing. It had potential, but it needed a lot of work. I decided to take the feedback seriously. I went back to the drawing board, made improvements, and started learning from my mistakes. By now, I had spent months working on the app, and I was getting a little burned out. The long nights and constant pressure were taking a toll on me. I barely saw my friends or family, and my health was starting to suffer. But I knew I couldn't quit now. I decided to launch a beta version, just to see how people would respond. I put up a simple landing page, offering early access to the app in exchange for feedback. The response was better than I expected. People were actually excited about the idea. They liked the concept, but they wanted more features and a smoother experience. At this point, I realized I needed help. I wasn't going to be able to build this alone. I started reaching out to other developers. It wasn't easy, though. I had no money to pay anyone up front, and I wasn't exactly offering anything of value yet. But I was determined. Eventually, I found a few developers who believed in the idea and were willing to work with me on a revenue-sharing model. We started working together, and things began to move faster. The app's functionality improved. The user interface became more polished, and we even started adding features like cloud syncing and multi-platform support. But just as things were starting to take off, disaster struck. One of our developers, who had been a key part of the project, suddenly quit. No warning, no explanation, he was just gone. The app broke, and we were left scrambling to fix everything. I was devastated. I had invested so much time and energy into this project, and now it felt like it was falling apart. I didn't give up, though. I took a step back, reassessed the situation, and realized that this was just another challenge I had to overcome. I found another developer, brought him on board, and we worked tirelessly to get the app back up and running. It took weeks, but eventually, we had a functional version again. By this point, the app had gained a small but loyal following. People were telling their friends about it, and word was starting to spread. We decided to take a big risk and launch the app on the App Store and Google Play. We knew it wasn't perfect, but we believed in it. The launch day was nerve-wracking. I kept refreshing the App Store pages, waiting for the first few downloads. Hours passed, and nothing happened. My heart sank. I was convinced it was over before it even started. But then, around midnight, the first download came in. Then another. Then another. Slowly but surely, people started downloading the app. The reviews started coming in, and to my relief, they were mostly positive. People were enjoying the features, the design, and the idea behind the app. But there were still bugs, glitches, and performance issues. We were barely keeping up with the demand, but we didn't stop. We worked day and night to fix the issues and improve the app. Over the next few months, the app started gaining traction. We added more features, fixed bugs, and polished the user experience. We even started offering premium features, which brought in some much-needed revenue. The hard work was finally paying off, and I was starting to see the fruits of my labor. But success didn't come without its challenges. We had to navigate tough competition, rising costs, and unexpected setbacks. There were times when I questioned whether I was making the right choice, but every time I considered quitting, I remembered why I started in the first place. Eventually, the app became profitable. We expanded our team, added new features, and reached more users than I ever thought possible. Looking back, it was one of the toughest, most exhausting, and rewarding experiences of my life. It wasn't a smooth ride, but it was a journey worth taking. The company continues to grow today, and we've expanded into other areas, but I'll never forget those early days. The sleepless nights, the frustration, the setbacks, and the moments of doubt, but also the excitement of seeing something that started as a simple idea turn into something real. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone thinking about starting a business, it would be this: don't expect it to be easy. There will be moments when you'll feel like giving up, but it's those moments that define you as an entrepreneur. If you can push through the hard times, you'll come out the other side stronger and more resilient. It's not about the destination. It's about the journey. And if you're willing to put in the work, there's no limit to what you can achieve. A few years ago, I found myself sitting in the same spot I had been sitting for hours. My computer screen was glowing in front of me, and I was endlessly scrolling through job listings. I had just gotten out of college with a degree in marketing, but the job market was a nightmare. The economy had just gone through a downturn, and finding a solid job seemed impossible. I kept trying to tell myself that I was doing everything right, but the reality was I was just stuck in a cycle of frustration. I had applied for at least 50 jobs that week. I spent hours perfecting my resume and writing tailored cover letters for each one. Each time I clicked send, I would feel a bit of hope that maybe this would be the one. But after a couple of weeks, I started receiving nothing but rejections. It was disheartening, to say the least. One night, after another rejection email came in, I sat there staring at my screen and thinking, there has to be a better way. That's when the idea hit me. What if I stopped looking for a job and started creating my own? What if I became the boss instead of the employee? It sounded crazy at first. I had no experience running a business. The thought of handling taxes, managing employees, and all the other responsibilities felt overwhelming. But as I sat there, something inside me clicked. What was the worst that could happen? I had nothing to lose. I took a deep breath and started doing some research. I looked into different business ideas and industry trends. The more I read, the more I realized there was one area I was particularly drawn to: digital marketing. It seemed like something I could leverage with my background. Social media, search engine optimization, SEO, email campaigns. These were all things I had learned about in college, and I had used them for personal projects here and there. I had never thought about turning it into a business before, but now it seemed like the perfect fit. I decided I was going to start my own digital marketing agency. I didn't have any clients yet, but I had the knowledge and the drive. I figured I could reach out to small businesses, entrepreneurs, and anyone else who might need marketing help but couldn't afford a large firm. At that point, I knew that I needed to start small and build my reputation from the ground up. The first step was setting up my website. I spent a few days researching website builders, and after some trial and error, I launched a simple, clean site that highlighted my services and included a blog with helpful marketing tips. I wasn't expecting much at first, but I figured that having an online presence would at least make me look legitimate. I then turned my attention to social media. I created accounts on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, where I shared content related to digital marketing, personal development, and entrepreneurship. This was the part where I really started getting excited. Seeing my posts get likes and comments made me feel like I was building something real. But despite all my effort, I didn't get my first client immediately. In fact, it took about 2 months before I landed my first project. It was a local bakery that needed help with social media management. The owner had heard of me through a mutual friend, and after a quick meeting, they decided to give me a shot. It wasn't a huge deal, but it was my first real opportunity to prove myself. The first few weeks were a blur. I worked around the clock, crafting social media posts, writing blog content, and learning everything I could about the bakery's audience. Slowly but surely, their social media engagement started to grow, and more customers started walking through their doors. After about a month, the bakery owner called me up and said, "I've never seen numbers like this. You're really onto something." That call was the turning point for me. It wasn't just validation. It was proof that I had the skills to succeed in this business. I immediately took that success and used it to market my services to other small businesses. I updated my website with a testimonial from the bakery owner and used the numbers to show how much I had helped them. The next few clients came in a little more easily. Word of mouth started to spread, and I started working with a handful of different local businesses. As my business grew, so did my ambitions. What started as a one-person operation quickly became something bigger. I hired a small team of freelance designers and writers to help with client projects. I also began focusing on building my personal brand. I started offering free webinars on digital marketing and created downloadable resources that would help business owners implement marketing strategies on their own. This helped me stand out from the competition, and more clients came my way. I soon realized that the key to growing my business wasn't just about providing a service, It was about building relationships with my clients. I made it a priority to truly understand their businesses and needs. Every time I sent an email or had a meeting, I made sure to ask questions that showed I was invested in their success. This approach paid off. My clients didn't just see me as a marketer. They saw me as a trusted partner who genuinely cared about their growth. Over time, my business continued to expand. I hired a full-time team and started bringing in larger clients, including e-commerce stores, health professionals, and tech companies. My revenue grew steadily, and I could finally say I was living my dream of being my own boss. But as rewarding as it was, I quickly realized that success came with its own set of challenges. Managing a growing team, handling more complex projects, and dealing with the pressure of scaling up was tough. I often found myself working late into the night, trying to keep up with the demands of the business. Despite the challenges, I remained determined to keep pushing forward. I focused on refining my processes, investing in new technologies, and continuing to learn and grow as a leader. Slowly but surely, my business became more streamlined and efficient. Looking back on everything, it's hard to believe how far I've come. From the days of endless job applications and rejection emails, I built something real and sustainable. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't quick, but every challenge along the way taught me something valuable. I learned that the best opportunities often come from the toughest situations, and that taking risks and trusting yourself can lead to incredible growth. As I write this, my digital marketing agency has grown to a point where I have a team of 10 people working with me. We serve clients all over the country, and the future looks incredibly bright. I no longer worry about job listings because I created my own path. The journey wasn't easy, but it was absolutely worth it. If you're out there struggling, wondering if you should take the leap and start your own business, I can tell you this: there is no better time than now. If I could do it, so can you. Just take that first step and keep going, even when it feels like nothing is working. You never know how close you are to that big breakthrough. I've been running my own online business for the past 5 years, and the story of how I went from broke and struggling to living a life I once only dreamed of is something I never thought I'd share. If you're looking for some inspirational stuff to get your day started, this is for you. It all started when I was 23. I had just graduated college, and like most fresh grads, I had no idea what I was doing with my life. I had a degree in marketing, but I hated the idea of working in a cubicle for the rest of my life. I watched my friends getting corporate jobs, while I was stuck at home, scrambling to figure out how I was going to pay off the student loans piling up. I spent a few months bouncing between odd jobs, bartending, temp work, anything I could get my hands on. During that time, I realized that I didn't want to be like most people around me. I didn't want to be stuck in a 9-to-5 grind, working just to get by. I was hungry for more. So, I turned to the internet. I figured if I could somehow build something online, I wouldn't have to rely on anyone else to make money. I started researching different ways to make money online and stumbled upon the concept of dropshipping. If you've never heard of dropshipping, it's basically a business model where you sell products without keeping any inventory. You find suppliers who ship the products directly to your customers. It sounded simple enough, and I was all in. I spent the next few weeks learning everything I could about it. The next step was building a website. I was clueless when it came to web design, but I decided to dive in anyway. I watched a ton of YouTube tutorials, bought a cheap website template, and just started. The process was messy. I was constantly making mistakes, learning things the hard way, and honestly, I was way over my head. But I couldn't quit. I needed this to work. I launched my first dropshipping store selling niche products, random stuff like phone cases, kitchen gadgets, and cool accessories. My first sale came after about a week of launching. I was thrilled, but also terrified. I didn't even know how I was going to handle the shipping or the customer service. But the moment I saw that money come through, something clicked. That sale was enough to give me a little bit of confidence, and from there, I started tweaking my store, experimenting with different products, and learning more about digital marketing. I spent hours every night reading articles, watching webinars, and absorbing as much information as I could. The real breakthrough came when I figured out Facebook ads. I spent months failing with them, blowing through my ad budget with little to show for it. But once I cracked the code, things changed fast. I started seeing consistent sales, and the business began to grow. Fast forward a year, and my online store was making enough to cover my bills and give me some breathing room. I still wasn't living large, but it was a far cry from the constant anxiety I'd felt before. I could feel the momentum building, and that made me want to push harder. At this point, I realized I couldn't keep doing everything myself. I hired a freelancer to help with my customer service, and I outsourced the design work for my store. That was another game changer. It freed up so much of my time, and I could focus on scaling the business rather than getting bogged down in small details. But then came the biggest challenge of all. After 2 years of steady growth, my suppliers suddenly went out of business. My sales tanked. I had built my whole business on one supplier, and I had no backup plan. Panic set in. I couldn't afford to lose everything. I had to think fast. I spent weeks contacting new suppliers, testing products, and reworking my entire store. The whole process was exhausting, but it was a wake-up call. If I wanted this business to last long-term, I had to stop putting all my eggs in one basket. I finally found a new supplier, and the store slowly regained its footing. But now, I was more cautious, more strategic. I diversified my product offerings, built relationships with multiple suppliers, and worked on building brand loyalty. Instead of just being another random online store, I wanted to create a brand people trusted. The next phase of growth came when I started expanding into other channels. I started selling on Amazon and eBay, and even created a small presence on Instagram. My income was no longer just reliant on one website. Slowly but surely, I started diversifying my streams of revenue, and my business began to take off. But the real kicker came when I realized I could scale the business with the right team. I hired a small team of marketers, copywriters, and social media managers. That's when things started to get really interesting. We launched new products, improved our ad strategies, and focused heavily on customer satisfaction. Fast forward another year, and my business had grown from a side hustle to a full-blown company. I was now employing people full-time, outsourcing parts of the operation, and growing faster than I ever thought possible. What's crazy is that I didn't set out to build a real business. I just wanted to make enough money to not worry about my bills. But once I got a taste of success, I couldn't stop. I wanted more. I wanted to build something that would outlast me. Looking back, it feels surreal. I went from being broke and lost to running a company with multiple employees, making over 6 figures a year. I still remember those sleepless nights in the early days, just hoping I could make rent. Now, I'm able to take vacations, invest in real estate, and even mentor other entrepreneurs who are just starting out. The biggest lesson I've learned is that persistence is key. There were so many times when I wanted to quit, when everything seemed like it was falling apart. But I pushed through, and that made all the difference. No one's going to hand you success on a silver platter. You have to go out there and grab it for yourself. I'm not saying you should get into drop shipping or start an online store, but the point is, there's no one-size-fits-all path to success. If you're in a rough spot right now, just know that it's possible to turn things around. You have to be willing to put in the work, make mistakes, and learn from them. That's the journey of entrepreneurship. If I can do it, so can you. I never thought I'd be the type of person to get into entrepreneurship. In fact, I was the kind of person who thought people with business ideas were either lucky or had some kind of in that I didn't. I had always been the steady employee, never rocking the boat, always just going with the flow. But my life took an unexpected turn when I lost my job during the first wave of the pandemic. It was a good job, too, one I had worked hard for. I was in sales at a tech company, and I'd put in countless hours perfecting my pitch. Then, in an instant, it was all gone. I spent the first few weeks of unemployment spiraling into panic. The savings I'd been proud of for so long started to dwindle, and the reality of how much time I had to fill without income was hitting hard. I'm sure I'm not alone when I say I spent a lot of time scrolling through Reddit looking for answers. It was there that I started seeing people sharing their stories of how they had turned their side hustles into full-time businesses. They were just regular people, not Silicon Valley types or college dropouts with millionaire parents. They were people like me, who had taken a chance, learned from failure, and had managed to build something real. That's when the idea hit me. I had always loved baking. It was a hobby that started out as something fun to do on weekends, but over time, it turned into a little obsession. I baked bread, cakes, cookies, basically anything that involved flour and sugar. But I never thought of it as a business. I'd give things away to friends and family, but it never crossed my mind that there could be a market for it. One late night, after a few too many beers, I posted a picture of a batch of sourdough I had just made on Instagram. It was nothing special, just a loaf of bread. But I was bored and decided to share it. To my surprise, a few people reached out asking if I sold my bread. I laughed it off at first, but then I thought about it for a second. Could this really be something? I quickly messaged a few friends to see if they would buy from me if I started selling. The responses were positive, so I figured I had nothing to lose. I could always go back to looking for a new job if it didn't work out. I started small. I borrowed a friend's kitchen space because my apartment kitchen was tiny and didn't have the right equipment. I figured out a way to make a few loaves, enough to sell to local people. I took a few pictures, wrote up a simple menu, and posted on Instagram that I was selling baked goods. I started getting orders almost immediately. My first few weeks were slow, but I didn't mind. The idea that people were willing to pay me for something I loved to do felt surreal. However, things didn't stay slow for long. Word of mouth spread, and within a few months, I was overwhelmed with orders. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. to bake, deliver in the morning, and then work on fulfilling more orders at night. I wasn't making much money at first, but I was building a brand. My focus was always on quality, making sure every loaf of bread or batch of cookies came out perfect. People appreciated that. I got messages thanking me for the little extra touches, whether it was a handwritten note or a perfectly tied ribbon on a box of treats. I started getting repeat customers, and I began offering new products like custom cakes, muffins, and even gluten-free options. One thing I learned quickly was that running a business wasn't just about making a good product. It was about managing expectations and staying organized. At first, I was terrible at it. I would forget orders or mix up delivery times. But I learned to keep detailed records, create a better order system, and, most importantly, ask for help when I needed it. That's when I brought my best friend on board. She had a background in marketing, and I had the product, so we worked together to create a website and set up online ordering. My sales doubled within the first month of launching the site. It was wild to think that just a few months earlier, I was sitting at home jobless, scrolling through Reddit, not even considering the possibility of owning a business. As my business grew, I faced new challenges. With the increased demand, I had to find a way to scale production. I couldn't keep using my friend's kitchen forever. I looked into renting a commercial kitchen space and figured out how I could make the jump to a more professional operation. At the same time, I started thinking about hiring employees. I needed help with baking, packaging, and even deliveries. I remember my first hire, a woman who was just as passionate about baking as I was. It felt like a huge step. Up until that point, I'd been working alone, and I wasn't sure how I'd handle the responsibility of managing someone else. But she was a natural, and our team grew from there. By the time I hit my first year in business, I was finally able to hire a small team. We had a storefront, too, a tiny but cozy space where customers could walk in and pick up their orders. Looking back, the first year was filled with uncertainty, mistakes, and hard lessons, but it was also the most fulfilling year of my life. I had built something from the ground up, and I had learned so much along the way. 2 years into my business, I was able to expand again. We moved into a larger location, brought in more staff, and introduced delivery services. My little bakery had turned into a small local chain, and I started getting offers for franchising. I hadn't even considered that as an option, but it was exciting to think about. Of course, with growth came new challenges. Cash flow became a constant concern, and managing multiple locations meant a lot more logistics. But it was a good problem to have. I remember one moment clearly, sitting down one evening after a particularly stressful day of managing orders and staff issues. I looked around at my team, who were all working hard in the kitchen, and realized how far I'd come. I went from someone who didn't think entrepreneurship was for them to being the owner of a growing business. I didn't have the perfect story, nor did I have everything figured out, but I had built something that mattered. It wasn't easy, but it was worth every sleepless night, every mistake, and every ounce of effort I put in. Now, when people ask me how I made it happen, I tell them it's not about having the perfect idea or the most glamorous start. It's about starting with what you have, being willing to make mistakes, and pushing forward even when it seems impossible. My business is still growing, but I know it's not the end of the journey. It's just the beginning. And to think, it all started with a loaf of sourdough. I always thought that success in business was about finding the right idea at the right time. But looking back, I realize it's more about perseverance, resilience, and a little bit of luck. My story isn't about having a brilliant business plan from the start. It's about learning from mistakes, constantly adapting, and never giving up, even when it felt like everything was falling apart. It all started when I was 22. I had just graduated from college with a degree in marketing, and like many fresh graduates, I had big dreams. I wanted to build something meaningful, something that would change the world, and I thought I could do it all by myself. My initial idea was to create an online store that would sell custom clothing. At the time, the market was growing, and I thought, why not get in on it? My plan was simple: design unique, personalized t-shirts, sell them online, and create a brand that people would love. I had zero experience in fashion or e-commerce, but I was determined. I spent all my savings on a cheap laptop, basic design software, and a website builder. The next few weeks were a blur of late nights, sketching designs, uploading them to my website, and figuring out how to use social media to promote my new store. I thought I had it all figured out. I spent hours writing posts, sharing images, and telling anyone who would listen about my new venture. But then reality hit. My sales were abysmal. I was barely making enough money to cover my website's hosting fees, let alone pay myself. The designs I thought would be unique weren't resonating with customers. And to make matters worse, I didn't even know how to properly market the brand. My Instagram followers were stagnant, my Facebook ads weren't converting, and no one was visiting my website. I felt like a failure. Instead of giving up, I decided to pivot. I went back to the drawing board and started researching. I read every article, watched every YouTube video, and reached out to successful entrepreneurs for advice. I realized my mistake. I was treating the business like a hobby rather than a serious venture. To succeed, I needed a clear vision and strategy, not just cute designs. I rebranded my business, focusing on a niche market, custom clothing for people who wanted to express their identity in creative ways. I started designing not just t-shirts, but hats, hoodies, and even socks. I realized that personal expression was a powerful tool, and I began promoting my brand as more than just a clothing line. It was about making a statement, showcasing individuality. I started reaching out to influencers in the fashion and self-expression space, offering them free products in exchange for shoutouts. Slowly but surely, things started to change. Sales began to pick up, and I started reinvesting the small profits back into marketing and better quality products. However, with success came new challenges. The business began growing faster than I had anticipated, and I was quickly overwhelmed. I was handling everything: customer service, designing products, ordering inventory, and even packing shipments. It wasn't sustainable. I needed help, but I couldn't afford to hire anyone yet. I had to learn how to delegate and use my time more efficiently. The turning point came when I hired my first employee, a part-time customer service rep. I'll never forget the feeling of relief when I didn't have to answer every email and manage every issue myself. It was the first step towards scaling the business. Over the next few months, I expanded my team, bringing on a designer, a social media manager, and even a logistics expert. With the right people in place, the company started to operate more smoothly. But success wasn't guaranteed. We faced obstacles every step of the way. One of the biggest challenges came when we partnered with a major supplier to streamline our production process. The supplier ended up being unreliable, and we were forced to cancel a large order right before the holiday season. It cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost revenue. I was devastated, but I didn't give up. I had learned the hard way that in business, setbacks were just part of the journey. I decided to take a more hands-on approach with production. We shifted to a local manufacturer, which allowed us to have better control over quality and timelines. It wasn't cheap, but it paid off. Our products improved and customer satisfaction skyrocketed. With better products and a stronger brand message, our sales grew exponentially. Around this time, I also started learning about the power of storytelling in business. I realized that people didn't just want to buy clothes. They wanted to buy into a story, a vision. I began sharing more about my journey, the struggles, the failures, the lessons learned. I was transparent with my customers, letting them in on the behind the scenes of running a business. This authenticity built trust and loyalty, and our customer base began to grow faster than ever before. The next big leap came when we expanded into international markets. Up until that point, our reach had been primarily within the US, but we started getting orders from overseas. We made the decision to invest in shipping and fulfillment systems that would allow us to handle international orders efficiently. It wasn't easy, and there were many moments when I doubted whether it was the right decision. But I took the plunge, and within a year, international sales made up 30% of our revenue. By this point, the company had grown significantly. We had a full team, a warehouse, and a loyal customer base. But despite our success, I was still worried. I had spent so much time focusing on growth and scaling that I hadn't stopped to appreciate how far we'd come. The business had taken over my life, and I had become so obsessed with success that I lost sight of what truly mattered: balance, relationships, and happiness. It was a wake-up call. I realized that I needed to redefine what success meant to me. It wasn't about being the biggest or the most profitable. It was about building a company that aligned with my values and allowed me to live the life I wanted. I began delegating even more, focusing on big-picture strategy rather than day-to-day operations. I took more time off, traveled, and reconnected with friends and family. Today, the business is thriving, but I've learned that the journey doesn't stop. There will always be challenges, but as long as I stay true to my vision, stay adaptable, and keep learning, I know I can keep moving forward. Starting a business isn't easy. It takes grit, resilience, and the ability to adapt when things don't go as planned. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: success isn't about having the perfect idea or the perfect plan from the start. It's about the ability to learn from your mistakes, keep pushing forward, and never give up on what you believe in. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I was always the type of person who believed in the hustle. It's what everyone told me would get me to the top. My parents were traditional, my father an engineer, my mother a teacher. I was expected to go to school, get a degree, and find a steady job. But deep down, I always knew that wasn't for me. I wanted more than just the 9 to 5 grind. I wanted something bigger, something I could call my own. After college, I didn't jump straight into a corporate job like most of my peers. Instead, I spent a few years bouncing around, trying to figure out what I truly wanted to do. I worked odd jobs, did some freelance writing, and even tried my hand at selling a few products online. None of it was particularly successful, but I learned a lot along the way. Each failure felt like a small step forward because, with every mistake, I was getting closer to the right idea. Then, in 2017, a chance encounter changed everything. I was at a networking event in my city, trying to make connections, when I met Sarah, a fellow entrepreneur. She was a few years older than me, already running a successful online store. We hit it off immediately. Over drinks, I learned that she had started her business from scratch, just like I was planning to do, but she had built it into a 6-figure income in less than 3 years. She shared her story with me, and I was blown away. She told me that the key to success wasn't just working hard. It was about working smart. She spoke about the importance of identifying a niche and truly understanding your target audience. She also emphasized the significance of building an online presence, something that would come to change my life. I left that night feeling inspired. Sarah had given me a glimpse into a world I never knew existed. I was more motivated than ever to start my own business. I spent the next several months researching e-commerce, digital marketing, and social media strategies. I devoured every piece of content I could find. I learned about SEO, branding, and customer psychology. I even took a few online courses and started building my own website. In early 2018, I launched my first e-commerce store. I had no product to sell, but I had a vision. I knew I wanted to create something that could add value to people's lives, something that would solve a problem. After weeks of brainstorming, I landed on the idea of selling eco-friendly home products. I was passionate about sustainability, and I knew that there was a growing demand for environmentally conscious goods. The first few months were tough. I spent countless hours refining my website, setting up my inventory, and working on my marketing strategy. I had no idea what I was doing at first, and my sales were slow. But I kept pushing, trying new strategies, optimizing my ads, and reaching out to influencers. Slowly but surely, I began to see progress. By the end of 2018, I had my first viral product. It was a bamboo toothbrush, and for some reason, it took off. People loved the idea of using a sustainable alternative to plastic, and they shared it on social media. The next thing I knew, I had thousands of orders flooding in. That moment felt like a turning point. My little side hustle was no longer just a hobby. It was a real business. I reinvested all my profits back into the company, upgrading my website, expanding my product range, and hiring a small team to help with customer service and order fulfillment. I also focused heavily on building my brand's presence on Instagram and Facebook. The more content I posted, the more people started noticing. 2019 was the year everything exploded. My sales skyrocketed, and my social media following grew exponentially. I was finally seeing the results of all my hard work, but it wasn't without its challenges. As my business grew, so did the complexity of running it. I had to deal with supplier issues, customer complaints, and the constant pressure of staying ahead of the competition. But I loved every minute of it. The thrill of building something from nothing was addictive. Then came the pandemic in early 2020. At first, I was scared. The entire world seemed to be crumbling, and businesses everywhere were shutting down. I was worried that my e-commerce store would be no exception. But then, something unexpected happened. The demand for eco-friendly products surged. People were stuck at home, and they had more time to think about their lifestyles and how they could make more sustainable choices. My sales shot up even higher than before, and my business went from a six-figure income to a seven-figure one in just a few months. That period was a whirlwind. I had to scale up my operations quickly to meet the demand. I moved into a bigger warehouse, hired more employees, and streamlined my logistics. I even started offering international shipping, something I had been hesitant to do before. The success felt surreal, and I kept telling myself, I can't believe this is happening. By the end of 2020, I had built a brand that was recognizable in the eco-friendly space. My products were sold in major online marketplaces, and I had a loyal customer base that trusted my brand. I also started giving back by donating a portion of my profits to environmental causes, something that resonated with my customers and strengthened my brand's identity. 2021 was when I realized that I was no longer just an entrepreneur. I had become a leader in my field. I had been invited to speak at conferences, participate in webinars, and even collaborate with other successful business owners. The recognition felt amazing, but it also came with a new set of challenges. I had to stay innovative, always looking for new ways to differentiate myself in a crowded market. I knew I couldn't rest on my laurels. I spent a lot of time focusing on improving customer experience, whether it was through faster shipping times, better packaging, or personalized customer service. I also worked on expanding my product line, introducing new sustainable products that my customers would love. Fast forward to 2025, and my business is bigger than I ever imagined. We now offer a wide range of products, from home goods to personal care items, and our brand has become synonymous with sustainability. I've even started mentoring other entrepreneurs, sharing my journey and the lessons I've learned along the way. The best part is that I've learned to enjoy the journey. There were times when I thought about giving up, when the stress was too much, but looking back, I realized that every failure, every mistake, was just a stepping stone to success. I didn't give up on my dream, and now I get to live it every single day. The road wasn't easy, and there were plenty of sleepless nights, but I wouldn't change a thing. Entrepreneurship isn't about quick wins. It's about perseverance, learning from failure, and constantly adapting. I've learned that success doesn't happen overnight, but with determination and a willingness to keep going, anything is possible. I started my business with just $300. It wasn't the ideal way to begin, and I didn't have the resources, the knowledge, or even a strong support network. But what I did have was a dream and an intense need to escape the typical 9 to 5 grind. This is the story of how I built my company from scratch, hustled for years, and eventually grew it into something that could support me, and eventually, a team of people I genuinely cared about. I was 24 at the time, living in a small apartment, and I had just been laid off from a dead-end job that paid just enough to cover rent and utilities. I felt like my life was going nowhere. I had a degree, sure, but it hadn't opened the doors I thought it would. Every job interview I went to felt like I was spinning my wheels. My student loans were mounting, my savings account was nearly empty, and I was frustrated with myself for not figuring things out yet. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but the fear of failure kept me stuck. One day, as I was scrolling through Reddit, where I'd spent hours procrastinating, I saw a post from an entrepreneur who had started their business with almost no money and no experience. They talked about how they hustled, how they learned from their mistakes, and how they grew their business into something that gave them the freedom they always wanted. That was the spark. If they could do it, why couldn't I? I knew I had to take action. The idea I had was simple enough. I wanted to sell custom t-shirts online. It wasn't revolutionary, but it seemed doable, and I could handle it on my own for the start. I had no experience in design, production, or e-commerce, but I was a fast learner, and I had the drive to keep pushing. I started by researching everything I could about the business. I didn't have much to spend, so I didn't have the luxury of hiring experts or consultants. Instead, I read blogs, watched YouTube tutorials, and studied the models of successful t-shirt brands. After a few weeks, I felt like I knew enough to start. I went onto Etsy and started looking at the top-selling t-shirt shops. I wanted to see how they marketed their products, what kind of designs they used, and what their pricing was like. I also signed up for Printful, a print-on-demand service, so I wouldn't have to keep inventory. This would allow me to focus on marketing and design while they handled the printing and shipping. I took my $300 and used it to create a simple website using Shopify. The rest went into a few basic designs, a professional-looking logo, and some initial advertising on Instagram. The first few weeks were slow. I wasn't making any sales, but I wasn't giving up either. I kept tweaking my designs, running small ads, and making sure I showed up on social media every day. I read books about branding and social media marketing. I engaged with people online, joined relevant communities, and started offering small discounts to gain some traction. Slowly, the sales started coming in. It wasn't much at first, but the validation of those first few customers made me feel like I was on the right path. I kept reinvesting every dollar I made back into the business. If I made $100, I would spend $90 of it on more advertising, new designs, and small improvements to the website. I also started working on building an email list to create repeat customers, which was a game changer. As time passed, I began learning more about customer service, product photography, and SEO search engine optimization. My website's traffic grew, and so did my sales. I also started collaborating with influencers to get my designs in front of a wider audience. Around the 6-month mark, I was making enough money to pay myself a modest salary. It wasn't much, but it felt like an enormous achievement. I had gone from scraping by to having the freedom to work for myself. But with the growth came new challenges. As my brand gained more recognition, I had to deal with customer service issues, returns, and inventory management. At one point, I was fulfilling orders late into the night, trying to stay on top of everything while still managing my social media presence. I was tired, stressed, and on the brink of burnout. That's when I realized I needed help. I hired my first employee, a part-time virtual assistant who helped me with customer service and basic administrative tasks. This freed up more of my time to focus on growth and allowed me to spend more time refining the business model. I also hired a freelance graphic designer to help with new t-shirt designs since I had hit a creative block. These small steps allowed me to scale my business even further. Within 2 years, I had grown my business to the point where I could afford to pay for a larger workspace and hire a full-time team. We started collaborating with local artists to create limited edition collections, and I expanded our product offerings to include other apparel items, like hoodies and hats. With each milestone, I felt a sense of accomplishment, but I knew the work was far from over. I also started focusing on my personal growth as an entrepreneur. I read books on leadership, took courses on financial management, and networked with other business owners. I learned how to delegate more effectively, how to run a team, and how to pivot when things weren't working. There were plenty of moments where I thought about quitting, but I kept pushing forward. The key was adapting and staying committed to the process. Today, 5 years after launching my business, I have a team of 15 employees, and we're on track to hit 7 figures in revenue this year. We've expanded into international markets, and we're known for our high-quality designs and sustainable practices. It's surreal to look back and realize how far I've come from that first $300 and a late night spent brainstorming on my couch. The most rewarding part of this journey has been watching my employees grow and thrive. I've been able to offer people jobs, give them the opportunity to build careers, and create an environment where everyone feels valued. I can honestly say that if I had known how hard it would be, I might have been too scared to start, but I'm glad I did. The lessons I've learned and the experiences I've had have made every challenge worth it. My advice to anyone starting out is simple: don't let fear or lack of resources hold you back. There will never be a perfect time, and you will never have all the answers. Start with what you have, keep learning, keep failing, and most importantly, keep pushing forward. The only way to fail is to quit. I grew up in a small town where dreams were big but opportunities were scarce. My family was never poor, but we weren't exactly wealthy either. My dad worked as a mechanic, and my mom worked 2 jobs, one as a cashier at the local grocery store and another as a part-time cleaner at a nearby office building. We lived modestly, but they always did their best to give my siblings and me everything we needed. From a young age, I was always fascinated by businesses. I'd spend hours reading about entrepreneurs and their stories, often daydreaming about what it would be like to own a company of my own. The only problem was, I had no idea what that could look like. I didn't come from a family of business owners, and frankly, I didn't know anyone who had done anything like that. But I was determined to figure it out. When I turned 18, I made the decision to move to the city to attend college. I didn't have much money, but I figured I'd work part-time jobs and save whatever I could. The first few months were rough. I took on a mix of customer service jobs, cashier, waiter, and even a short stint as a delivery driver. I hated every minute of it, but I kept telling myself that it was just temporary. It was during one of these jobs that I had my first real taste of business. I was working as a server at a mid-range restaurant in a bustling part of the city. The restaurant was owned by a husband and wife duo who were in their early 40s. They were friendly, but the more I watched them, the more I realized how little they knew about running a business. They constantly had issues with inventory, late-night scheduling problems, and often struggled to keep employees happy. One night, after closing time, the husband was venting about how much he hated dealing with the numbers and managing the back end of the business. That's when it hit me. There were a lot of small businesses out there that needed help with operations and logistics. I had no formal business training, but I had a knack for organizing and solving problems. I started thinking, what if I could help these small businesses run more efficiently? I had no idea how to start, but I knew I had to give it a try. I started doing some freelance work, offering to help small businesses in my area with their inventory management, streamlining processes, and handling basic accounting tasks. I began by offering my services at a low rate, just to get my foot in the door. In the beginning, it was tough. I was barely making enough to cover my rent, but I was gaining experience, and that's what mattered most. It didn't take long before word spread, and I had a steady stream of clients. I built my reputation by offering exceptional service at a competitive price. My first big break came when a local bakery asked me to help them set up an online store. They had been operating for years without one, and their business was beginning to plateau. I worked with them for weeks, setting up their website, organizing their inventory, and teaching them how to manage their online orders. The results were impressive. Their sales doubled in the first month. That project was a turning point for me. I realized that I wasn't just helping small businesses. I was helping them grow. I loved the feeling of taking a business that was struggling and turning it around. By the end of that year, I had built a solid client base, and I was making more money than I had ever imagined. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. I quickly learned that the more clients I had, the more problems arose. There were days when I felt overwhelmed, like I couldn't keep up with all the work. I often had to work late into the night just to stay on top of everything. And then, there were the clients who didn't appreciate my work. There was one client in particular, a small family-owned furniture store, who was constantly dissatisfied with the services I provided. Despite my best efforts, they were always demanding more for less. After a few months, I finally had to let them go. It was tough, but I realized that I needed to set boundaries and not let clients take advantage of my time and skills. Around this time, I realized I needed to scale my business. I couldn't do everything myself, and I knew I needed help. So, I made my first big hire, a part-time assistant to help with client communications and paperwork. The decision wasn't easy. I had spent years doing everything on my own, and the thought of giving up control was scary. But it paid off. With the extra help, I was able to take on more clients and continue growing my business. A year later, I made another big leap. I started offering consulting services for businesses that were looking to expand into the digital world. Many of my clients were still relying on outdated methods of marketing, and I could see that they needed help adapting to the digital age. I learned everything I could about digital marketing, SEO, and social media, and slowly began to offer these services to my clients. It wasn't long before my business became known as a one-stop shop for small businesses looking to streamline their operations and establish an online presence. But even with success, I faced challenges. There was a period of about 6 months where I struggled with burnout. I had become so focused on growing my business that I neglected my personal life. I was working 12-hour days, and I didn't have time to relax, let alone spend time with friends or family. It took a toll on my health and my relationships. I knew I had to make changes if I wanted to keep going. So, I started outsourcing even more tasks. I hired more employees, brought on additional freelancers, and created processes to make everything run more smoothly. I also took time for myself. I started exercising, taking vacations, and even hiring a mentor who could help me with the business side challenges I was facing. As the years went by, my business continued to grow. I expanded into new markets and offered even more services to help my clients succeed. I hired a full-time team, set up multiple locations, and eventually sold my company for a significant profit. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. I went from struggling to make rent in a small apartment to running a successful company that helped hundreds of small businesses thrive. The journey wasn't easy, but every setback and every failure taught me something valuable. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that success doesn't come overnight. It takes years of hard work, perseverance, and a willingness to learn from your mistakes. There were times when I wanted to quit, when everything felt like it was falling apart. But looking back now, I wouldn't change a thing. Every struggle, every late night, and every failure led me to where I am today. I'm now in a position where I can give back and mentor other aspiring entrepreneurs, something I wish I had when I was starting out. And while I've sold my business, I'm still involved in the entrepreneurial community, helping others achieve the same success I once dreamed of. It's a full circle moment, and I'm grateful for every part of this journey. I was 24 years old when I decided to take the leap into entrepreneurship. I had just graduated from college, armed with a degree in marketing, a mountain of student debt, and a burning desire to build something of my own. I didn't have much money saved up, barely enough to pay rent for the next few months, but I was determined. I had always been a dreamer, and in my mind, the only way to escape the daily grind was to create something that would allow me to live life on my terms. I had worked a few internships throughout college, and while the experience was valuable, none of the companies seemed to offer the kind of freedom I craved. I didn't want to be another cog in the machine. I wanted to create a machine of my own. But the question was, how? For a long time, I debated over what kind of business I should start. I knew I needed something scalable, something that could grow quickly. I didn't have the luxury of slowly building up a customer base over time. I needed to generate cash fast. That's when I stumbled upon an idea that, in retrospect, seemed obvious, but at the time, felt like a revelation: e-commerce. I had spent years buying products online, and the idea of selling products that I believed in seemed like a perfect fit. I started looking for suppliers, researching market trends, and analyzing competitors. My first idea was to sell high-quality fitness gear. I was into fitness myself and thought it would be easy to connect with others who shared my passion. So, I began working on building an online store. The first few weeks were full of excitement and anxiety. I spent hours designing my website, sourcing products, and figuring out how to market my business. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was determined. I used Shopify to create my store, learned basic SEO, and tried to get my products in front of as many people as possible. But here's the thing. It wasn't easy. I quickly realized that just because you put a product online doesn't mean people will magically find it and buy it. I was pouring money into Facebook ads, Instagram posts, and influencer partnerships, but nothing was converting. I remember one particular night when I checked my sales dashboard after a week of heavy marketing and saw that I had made a grand total of $36 in sales. After the costs of the ads and product shipping, I was in the red. It was crushing. I had worked so hard, and yet it felt like I was spinning my wheels. But I wasn't about to give up. I took a step back and reevaluated everything. I looked at my customer acquisition costs, the margins on my products, and the feedback I was getting. After some soul-searching and a lot of trial and error, I realized I had made a mistake in my approach. I had been too broad in my target market. Fitness was a massive niche, and I wasn't distinguishing myself enough to stand out. I needed to narrow my focus. That's when I pivoted. Instead of selling general fitness gear, I decided to focus on a very specific segment: eco-friendly fitness products. I had seen a growing trend in sustainable products, and I knew there was a market of environmentally conscious consumers who would be willing to pay a premium for high-quality, sustainable gear. It was a gamble, but I was ready to take it. I started sourcing eco-friendly yoga mats, reusable water bottles, and biodegradable resistance bands. I revamped my website to reflect this new niche, focusing on the benefits of sustainable products. I worked with eco-friendly influencers who were more than happy to support a brand with a cause they believed in. Slowly but surely, I started to see sales trickle in. But even with the pivot, growth was still slow. I knew I had to be patient and keep pushing. Then, one day, something clicked. I had been running a promotion on Instagram where I gave away one of my eco-friendly yoga mats in exchange for a follow and a tag. It wasn't a huge giveaway, but it got people talking. That post went viral. Within a few days, I had hundreds of new followers and dozens of sales. The boost in social proof was huge. People started seeing my products in the hands of influencers, and it became clear that I wasn't just some random seller trying to make a quick buck. I had built a brand that people believed in. From there, the business took off. I reinvested the profits into more advertising, expanding my product line, and enhancing the customer experience. I focused on making my website more user-friendly and improving my shipping times. I partnered with more influencers, and I began to get featured in blogs and publications dedicated to sustainable living. The orders kept rolling in, and I hired my first employee to help with customer service. For the first time, I could see my hard work starting to pay off. Fast forward to today, and my business has grown far beyond what I ever imagined. I've expanded into a variety of sustainable products, from fitness gear to eco-friendly home goods, and I've been able to scale the business to the point where I can pay off all my student loans and more. I now have a team of 15 employees, a warehouse, and even a small retail store. We ship worldwide and have a loyal customer base that values the quality and sustainability of our products. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. The journey wasn't easy, and there were many moments where I thought about quitting. But every setback, every failure, and every challenge only pushed me to work harder. I'm proof that it's not about having the perfect idea from the start. It's about being willing to adapt, learn, and grow as an entrepreneur. And most importantly, it's about not giving up, even when things seem impossible. My advice to anyone thinking about starting their own business is simple. Take the leap, but don't expect instant success. Be prepared to fail, and when you do, learn from it. Success doesn't come overnight, but with perseverance, you can build something that lasts. Keep pushing forward, and remember that every obstacle is an opportunity to grow. I had always dreamed of becoming an entrepreneur, but like many others, the idea seemed distant and elusive. I grew up in a small town, the kind where everyone knew everyone's business, and the prospects for success felt limited. My parents, both hardworking individuals, always emphasized the value of a steady job, something secure. But deep down, I knew that wasn't for me. I wanted to build something of my own, something that could leave a lasting impact, not just a paycheck. It all started when I was in my late 20s. I had a decent job at a marketing firm, making a comfortable salary. But the work wasn't inspiring, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't living up to my potential. It was around this time that I stumbled upon a small online course about e-commerce. The concept seemed simple enough: create an online store, source products, and sell them directly to customers. But as I delved deeper, I realized that building a successful online business was far more complex than it appeared on the surface. Still, something about it clicked with me. The idea that I could be my own boss, set my own hours, and create a brand from scratch was too tempting to ignore. I took the plunge and signed up for the course. It wasn't cheap, but I was determined to make it work. I spent months learning everything I could: product research, building a website, understanding digital marketing, and how to use social media to drive traffic. My head was spinning, but I was excited. I knew that this was the path I wanted to take. I also knew that I wasn't going to get there by just watching videos and reading articles. I needed to take action. The first few months were a struggle. I created a website, sourced products, and launched my online store. I chose a niche, fitness equipment and accessories, because I was passionate about health and wellness. But I quickly realized that passion alone wasn't enough. The sales weren't coming in, and I was burning through my savings trying to figure out what I was doing wrong. I remember sitting at my computer one night, feeling defeated. My sales had been nearly non-existent, and I was about to give up. That's when I decided to look for help. I joined a few e-commerce forums and groups, hoping to get advice from people who had already been through the grind. What I learned was eye-opening. I wasn't alone. Every entrepreneur had faced similar struggles. But more importantly, I learned that success wasn't about getting everything right from the start. It was about testing, iterating, and adapting. Armed with this new perspective, I went back to the drawing board. I revamped my website, tweaked my product offerings, and adjusted my marketing strategy. I started running Facebook ads, using Instagram influencers to promote my products, and engaging with my audience through content marketing. Slowly, things began to change. My first sale came in after almost 6 months of hard work. It wasn't much, but it felt like a victory. It was proof that the effort I had put in was starting to pay off. Over the next year, I refined my strategies, learned from my mistakes, and started to build a small but loyal customer base. I reinvested every penny I made back into the business, upgrading my website, expanding my product range, and increasing my ad budget. The growth was slow, but it was steady. I realized that success wasn't a sprint, it was a marathon. Then, something unexpected happened. One of my Instagram posts went viral. I had shared a video showing how to use one of my products in a creative way, and people started sharing it. Within a few days, my website traffic exploded. Sales followed suit, and for the first time, I saw the potential of my business. It wasn't just about a few $100s a month, it was about something much bigger. I seized the opportunity and scaled aggressively. I hired a small team to help with customer service, logistics, and marketing. I reached out to more influencers, partnered with fitness bloggers, and began running larger ad campaigns. The business grew rapidly, and within 2 years, I had turned a small side hustle into a six-figure business. I couldn't believe it. My dream was becoming a reality. But with success came new challenges. Managing a growing business wasn't easy. I had to learn how to delegate, how to manage a team, and how to handle the pressure of scaling. There were days when I felt overwhelmed and wondered if I could keep up with the pace. But I reminded myself that every challenge was an opportunity to grow. Fast forward to today, and my business is thriving. We've expanded into new markets, added new product lines, and have a loyal customer base that trusts our brand. I'm no longer working 18-hour days, and I have a team of incredible people who help run the business. I've even been able to hire a mentor to help me navigate the next stage of growth. Looking back, I realize how much I've learned, not just about business, but about myself. The journey wasn't easy, and there were plenty of moments when I felt like giving up. But the key to my success was persistence, learning from my mistakes, and being willing to adapt. I'm living proof that with enough determination, even the most unlikely dream can come true. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that entrepreneurship isn't a linear path. It's filled with twists, turns, and obstacles. But if you keep going, if you stay focused on the long-term goal, and if you're willing to learn and grow, you can achieve more than you ever thought possible. So, to anyone out there thinking about starting their own business or pursuing their own dream, don't give up. The road is tough, but it's worth it. The challenges will come, but so will the victories. Keep pushing forward, and you'll get there. I started my business with just $500 and an idea that most people told me was crazy. It wasn't a groundbreaking tech product or a revolutionary service. It was a niche business in an industry that many had written off as outdated, selling vintage vinyl records. But I'll tell you, that crazy idea turned into something much bigger than I ever imagined. It all began back in 2014. I had just finished college, and like most of my peers, I was expected to follow the usual path, get a job in a corporate office, climb the ladder, and maybe buy a house when I was 40. But that life never appealed to me. The thought of sitting in an office cubicle every day, grinding away in a job that didn't excite me, made my stomach churn. I've always loved music, and ever since I was a kid, vinyl records had fascinated me. The sound, the art, the nostalgia, it was something special. I had started collecting records in high school, and over the years, I had amassed a small collection. I noticed that despite the digital age taking over, vinyl records were making a quiet comeback. There was a group of people out there, mainly older collectors and younger enthusiasts, who appreciated the medium, even though the mainstream had largely ignored it. I knew there was potential. People had told me I was crazy for wanting to start a vinyl record business. It's a dying industry, they'd say. You're not going to make any money. But something in my gut told me that the demand was there, even if it wasn't immediately obvious. I didn't have much money, just a few $1,000s saved up from odd jobs, and a little help from my parents. I took the plunge and put in $500 to get started. I bought my first batch of records, some classic albums, a few rare ones, and some modern pressings from new artists. I started small, selling online through platforms like eBay, Discogs, and Facebook Marketplace. I also set up an Instagram account to showcase my collection and started connecting with people who shared my passion. The first few months were slow. I barely sold anything. I remember wondering if I had made a huge mistake. I'd spend hours researching vinyl records, learning about their value, the different pressings, and the best places to source them. I wasn't just selling records. I was becoming a curator, a historian of sorts. But there was something about the process that I loved. I enjoyed hunting down rare finds, cleaning the records, and ensuring they were in the best condition possible before listing them for sale. Then, one day, everything clicked. I came across a collection of 80s punk rock records at a garage sale. They were in fantastic condition, and many of them were highly sought after. I paid $50 for the lot and listed them online. Within hours, I had offers flooding in. I sold all of them for over $1,000. That was the turning point. I realized that I wasn't just selling records. I was selling a piece of history. People didn't just want vinyl because it sounded better or because it was trendy. They wanted it because it made them feel something. These records represented memories, emotions, and experiences. That was when I knew I had found my niche. I started reinvesting every penny I made into growing the business. I expanded my inventory by reaching out to record stores, attending record fairs, and even cold calling old music shops that were closing down. The key was finding records that weren't just popular but had a unique value, whether it was a limited pressing, an obscure album, or something that had historical significance. As I grew, I started to branch out into offering services that other vinyl sellers weren't. I began offering record cleaning and restoration services, something I had learned to do over the years. Many of my customers were people who had inherited their parents' or grandparents' record collections and wanted to bring them back to life. I also started to specialize in harder-to-find genres like jazz and early rock and roll. By 2017, my business was making enough money that I could quit my day job and focus on it full-time. I was traveling across the country to attend record fairs, building relationships with other collectors, and even finding records from international sellers. I also began offering online consultations for people who wanted to know more about collecting vinyl, helping them find rare records, and educating them about the history of different albums. But even as my business grew, it wasn't without its challenges. The market for vinyl had expanded, and competition had become fierce. I had to find ways to stand out from the crowd. One of the things I did was create a brand that wasn't just about selling records. It was about fostering a community. I started a blog where I wrote about the history of vinyl, interviews with artists, and the stories behind rare albums. I also began offering limited edition releases of my own, collaborating with local artists to produce vinyl records that weren't available anywhere else. The community I built through social media and my website became one of the most rewarding parts of the business. I had people from all over the world reaching out to me, asking for advice or sharing their own collections. I built a loyal customer base who trusted me not only because I knew my stuff, but because I was passionate about what I was doing. In 2019, I opened my first physical store in a small downtown location. It wasn't much, just a small space with walls covered in records and a few tables scattered around, but it became a hub for vinyl lovers. The store had a vibe that you couldn't get from online shopping. People could come in, dig through boxes of records, and talk to me about their favorite albums. It wasn't just about buying and selling. It was about creating an experience. Fast forward to 2023, and my business has grown beyond anything I ever expected. I now have a team that helps me run the shop, manage the online orders, and handle the social media. We host events at the store, including live music, record signings, and vinyl listening parties. I've even launched my own record label, releasing music from emerging artists who want to get their work onto vinyl. I still remember the days when I had nothing but $500, a passion for vinyl, and a belief that I could make it work. Today, my business is a six-figure operation, and I've been able to help countless other music lovers find their own treasure troves of vinyl records. I'm living proof that sometimes the craziest ideas are the ones that work, as long as you have the determination to see them through. The journey hasn't been easy, and it hasn't been fast. There were countless late nights, long weekends, and moments when I questioned if it was all worth it. But in the end, I did it. I built something that not only allowed me to live my passion, but also gave me the opportunity to help others rediscover the magic of vinyl. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Start small, stay focused, and don't let the naysayers get to you. Believe in your idea and keep pushing forward. The road won't always be smooth, but the reward is worth the effort. I never thought I'd be where I am now. If you told me 5 years ago that I'd own a successful business, be my own boss, and have the freedom to travel whenever I wanted, I would have laughed. I was broke, struggling with student loans, and stuck in a 9 to 5 that drained me every single day. But this story isn't about some magical overnight success. It's about the grit, the grind, and how persistence paid off in a way I never imagined. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business. My parents were hardworking, but they never made much money. We didn't have much, but we made do. I wasn't a genius in school, but I wasn't failing either. I just sort of coasted through life, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do. I went to college because it was the thing to do, not because I was passionate about anything. I ended up majoring in business, mainly because it seemed like a safe bet. But the truth was, I wasn't sure what I wanted. I graduated with a mountain of student debt and an even bigger question: what now? I found a job at a marketing firm, making decent money for someone fresh out of college. But I hated every minute of it. The work was boring, the office politics were exhausting, and I felt like I was just another cog in the machine. I wanted out. I wanted something more. But I didn't know what that something was. One evening, I was scrolling through Reddit when I stumbled upon a post from someone who had started a small business selling custom t-shirts online. They talked about how they started with just a couple $100 and built it into a full-time income. Something clicked in me. I thought, if they can do it, why can't I? But I had no experience in running a business, no knowledge of e-commerce, and definitely no money to invest. But I was determined. I spent the next few weeks binge reading every article, watching YouTube videos, and asking questions on Reddit forums. I learned about print-on-demand services, how to design shirts, and the basics of running an online store. I had no technical skills, but I was willing to put in the work. After a month of research, I finally took the plunge. I opened an online store selling custom-designed t-shirts. I started with simple designs that were easy to make. I spent my evenings creating the shirts, setting up my website, and doing everything I could to get the word out. I used social media to promote my designs and tried to connect with influencers who might be interested in wearing my shirts. For the first few months, nothing happened. I barely made any sales, and I was about to give up. But I kept going. I learned from every failure. I realized that my designs weren't standing out, so I started focusing on niche markets. I also realized that my website looked amateurish, so I hired a freelancer to help improve the design. Slowly but surely, things started to improve. I started making a few sales each week, and then a few each day. But just as things were beginning to look up, I hit a huge roadblock. My main supplier, the company that printed and shipped my shirts, had some technical difficulties and started taking longer and longer to fulfill orders. This was a disaster. My customers were angry, my reputation was tarnished, and I felt like everything was falling apart. I knew I had to do something. I didn't want to give up on my dream, but I also didn't want to lose my customers. So I did what any desperate entrepreneur would do. I started reaching out to other print-on-demand companies. After several months of trial and error, I found a supplier that met my needs: faster fulfillment, better quality, and more reliable customer service. With the new supplier in place, I revamped my website, updated my product listings, and relaunched my business. I also got serious about paid advertising. I invested in Facebook and Instagram ads, targeting specific groups who would be interested in my designs. The results were immediate. Sales started coming in faster than I could handle. I had a steady stream of customers, and I was finally making money. But even then, I wasn't done. I knew that to really scale my business, I needed to get more creative. So I started offering limited edition designs, collaborating with artists, and running flash sales to create urgency. I also worked on building my brand. I wasn't just selling t-shirts anymore. I was creating a lifestyle. As time went on, my business grew exponentially. I hired a small team to help with customer service, marketing, and product fulfillment. I even had to move my operation out of my tiny apartment into a small office. The money was rolling in, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was actually doing something meaningful. But success didn't come without its challenges. There were moments when I doubted myself, when the pressure to keep growing became overwhelming. I had to make tough decisions, hire more people, invest in new technologies, and continue to innovate. There were even times when I thought about quitting and going back to a normal job. But every time I felt that way, I remembered why I started in the first place. I wanted freedom. I wanted control over my life. Now, 5 years later, my business generates a six-figure income, and I'm living the life I always dreamed of. I've traveled to places I never thought I'd go, and I'm doing work that I'm passionate about. I'm not saying I have everything figured out, far from it. There are still days when I feel like I'm in over my head. But I've learned that the key to success is persistence. It's about learning from failure, adapting, and never giving up. So to anyone reading this who's thinking about starting a business or pursuing a dream, here's my advice. It won't be easy. There will be setbacks, moments of doubt, and times when you feel like quitting. But if you're willing to put in the work, learn from your mistakes, and keep going when things get tough, you can make it. And when you look back, you'll be amazed at how far you've come. This is the story of how I went from barely scraping by to running a six-figure business in under 5 years. I had no plans of becoming an entrepreneur. I was just a regular guy with a regular job in a small city. I was working in a dead-end call center job, just trying to make enough to pay rent and maybe get a beer on the weekend. My life revolved around the monotonous 9 to 5 grind and a sense of dread that every day felt like a repeat of the last. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was around late 2018 when I found out my company was outsourcing our department to another country. My whole world came crashing down in an instant. At that point, I had been in the company for over 3 years. I had just bought a car with a loan, and I was living paycheck to paycheck. Losing my job meant not just losing an income, but also my stability. For the first couple of weeks after I was laid off, I panicked. I had no idea what to do. I applied for every job under the sun, but every rejection made me feel like I was stuck in an endless loop of failure. I wasn't even sure what I wanted to do anymore, let alone what I could do. Then I started looking into freelance work. I knew I wasn't the best at anything, but I had basic knowledge of digital marketing from a few online courses I had taken on the side. I decided to give it a try. I started small, offering social media management services to local businesses. At first, it was humiliating. I reached out to anyone I could think of, friends, family, businesses I had never heard of, offering my services for nearly free just to get my foot in the door. My first gig was a small local coffee shop that agreed to pay me a whopping $150 a month to manage their Instagram account. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I spent hours learning and tweaking. I looked up everything I could about growing social media, writing content, designing posts. Slowly, I started seeing results. The coffee shop's engagement grew, they got new customers, and they even asked me to help them run ads. Word of mouth started to spread, and I gained a few more clients. Each one paid me a little more, but I still wasn't making enough to live comfortably. I knew I needed to scale up. But how? I had no capital to invest in marketing and no experience in running a business. I couldn't afford to hire anyone, so I had to figure out how to do it myself. So, I poured myself into learning everything I could about marketing, sales, and running a business. I watched hours of YouTube videos, read countless articles, and spent late nights experimenting with different strategies. By the end of 2019, I had learned enough to realize that I needed to pivot. I wasn't just a social media manager anymore. I was a digital marketing consultant. I started focusing on helping small businesses build their entire online presence, from websites to email campaigns to social media ads. I learned about SEO, paid advertising, and how to design simple websites. My offerings became more comprehensive, and I started charging higher rates. The turning point came when I landed a bigger client, a local gym that had been struggling to attract new members. They had a decent following on social media but weren't converting that into actual business. I took on the challenge, created a detailed plan, and revamped their online marketing strategy. Within 3 months, their membership numbers went up by 40%. They were thrilled, and I was able to raise my prices significantly. Fast forward to 2020, and I was fully self-employed. My business had grown beyond what I ever thought was possible, and I had gained a reputation in my city as a go-to digital marketing expert. I started to hire a small team of freelancers to help with tasks I couldn't keep up with, like graphic design and copywriting. I was still working out of my tiny apartment, but things were starting to look up. The pandemic hit in early 2020, and like many businesses, I had to adapt quickly. A lot of my clients were small businesses that were forced to shut down, and I knew I needed to pivot once again to survive. I reached out to my clients and offered them new services to help them adjust to the new reality, moving their business online, offering virtual consultations, and creating e-commerce platforms. I even helped some of them set up delivery services or pivot to online-only models. The feedback was overwhelming. I was now an essential part of their survival strategy. At this point, I realized that I needed to stop thinking like a freelancer and start thinking like a business owner. I incorporated my business, created a website, and launched a brand new service. Instead of just offering marketing services, I began teaching other small business owners how to market their businesses online. I created a few online courses, started offering one-on-one coaching, and launched a membership program for entrepreneurs looking for ongoing advice. The money started rolling in faster than I could handle. By the end of 2021, my business was making 6 figures. I was working with clients from all over the world, and my team had grown to 5 people. I no longer had to worry about paying bills on time or living paycheck to paycheck. I had achieved financial freedom, something I had only dreamed of just a few years earlier. But with that success came new challenges. I had to learn how to manage a team, deal with taxes, handle client expectations, and figure out how to scale my business even further. I had become a full-fledged entrepreneur, and there were no easy answers anymore. Every day brought new obstacles, new lessons, and new opportunities. In 2022, I took the leap and expanded my business even further. I hired a sales team, invested in marketing campaigns, and started expanding into new niches. I also started speaking at conferences, sharing my story with other aspiring entrepreneurs. My business had become a platform to help others achieve what I had, to break free from the traditional 9 to 5 grind and build something on their own. Now, as I look back on that time in 2018, when I was jobless and uncertain, I can hardly believe how far I've come. What started as a desperate side hustle has turned into a thriving, multi-six-figure business with a growing team and a bright future. The journey hasn't been easy, but every challenge has been worth it. If you're reading this and you're stuck in a job you hate, or you feel like you don't know what your next move should be, I want to tell you this. You can change your life. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. But if you have the drive, the passion, and the willingness to learn, you can turn things around. It took me years of mistakes, failures, and sleepless nights, but now I wake up every day excited for what's next. And if I can do it, you can too. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.